Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, this is your brother Isa Ma. Today I'm very happy to introduce to you a friend of mine, brother Harith. He's from Vietnam. He's a revert, but he's a Hafiz al-Qur'an. And there are many other interesting stories about him that we will talk about, inshallah. He has already inspired me and benefited me a lot. So I hope in this conversation, what we will talk about will also benefit and inspire you, bi'ithnillah. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam
How are you, brother Harith?
Alhamdulillah.
I introduced you a little bit, but in the first section, let's get people to know more about you. So I already said that you are a revert,
Yeah.
but maybe tell us, when did you revert to Islam and why and how?
And I reverted to Islam like 10 years ago, and it was in 2012. And I finished my high school. Then I went to Ho Chi Minh City, and there I met the Muslim people, and I started to do the research, and I found Islam, and I came to Darul Akam in Singapore, and I make my conversion there.
You said that you came into contact with some Muslims. Like, how exactly? What did you see that attracted you to Islam?
Oh, I was so scared after the Muslim when I saw the ladies, they wear the hijab, and I scared of them. I thought they do some kind of magic, the magicians. But slowly I do the research, and I found that they are Muslim and they are against magic as Islam teaches. So I started to go to the mosque, and I studied with friends, the foreigners who are working in Vietnam.
So your first contact with Islam
Yeah.
was simply that you saw some Muslim women on the street wearing hijab.
Yes.
And that made you curious, like,
Yes.
you know, why are they dressed like this? So you started doing research about Islam.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah, I feel like this is already a good reminder for Muslims. Sometimes the visual representation, you know, the things that people can see that they identify as Muslims is actually quite important. It's a good starting point for people to become curious about Islam. You are a Hafiz al-Qur'an, so you would know that in the Qur'an, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned something like, tell the believing women to cover themselves, so that the disbelievers will know that they are believers.
Right.
So I think we should be proud to you know, have some visual symbols in ourselves. They may not be let's say how to say religious per se, but they have such influence to other people when they see it. So it can be a good, you know, starting point of da'wah and perhaps guidance for others.
Yeah.
So you started learning about Islam, and you reverted in 2012.
Yes.
But I forgot to introduce that brother Harith is currently a student of the Islamic University in Medina, in the Department of Da'wah. So he's actually Ustad Harith, I should call him. And inshallah, in the future, Sheikh Harith. But tell us, when did you come to Medina, and why did you decide to study in Medina?
I wanted to know how to recite the Quran to earn the reward from Allah. Then I started to apply for some places. I applied to Malaysia, Kuwait, and in Medina, and even in Mecca. And I got accepted in Medina, and then I moved to Medina to continue my study. To continue the Quran. That's what I was dreaming, to understand the Quran.
SubhanAllah. So you wanted to understand the Quran, and you wanted to recite the Quran. You had this love for the Quran, and immediately you put that into action. Like, you started applying everywhere to find a place where you can study the Quran. SubhanAllah. I think this is where many people fall short. You know, they perhaps have a good intention, or they have a goal, but they don't put that into action immediately. You know, they have a lot of second thoughts, a lot of hesitations. So we should learn from brother Harith. If you really want something, if you really love something, you know, something that is beneficial to you, something that draws you closer to Allah, then you should start doing it immediately, right? Just put yourself in the path, set out, and inshallah Allah will guide you towards a way. So What inspired me a lot from what we talked about earlier is your journey of learning and memorizing the Quran, which to me is quite shocking. As a revert who studied Arabic, only a few years ago, I guess.
Yeah.
But you already memorized the entire Quran. So tell us how you memorized the Quran and how it started and some of the tips perhaps to us.
It was so hard for me at the beginning because at the time I went to Medina, I only memorized Surah and Fatiha and Surah and Ikhlas.
Just two.
Yeah,
Mashallah.
just two. And slowly in the first year I started to learn the grammar of Arabic. Then the second year I started to memorize from the Surah and Baqarah. And after that, Alhamdulillah, I finished the Surah and Nas.
What was difficult for you and how did you overcome those difficulties in this journey?
The Arabic wasn't easy for me. That's why like one verse, I need to repeat some difficult words, some different ayah until I make it familiar with my tongue. And after that, after like a few days, I will forget it, and I had to do the rehearsal to muraja.
I think one thing that a lot of people do when they memorize the Quran is that they start with great passion, but after some time, the passion dies down and they give up or they stop.
Yeah.
It's hard to have that consistency, that thabat. So what kept you steady on this journey? What kept you moving?
I asked Allah to increase the love for Him and the love for the Quran, and that's why I could like go every day to the Masjid of Prophet and stay there and just stay to read the Quran by myself. And then after Asr, I go to the Sheikh, one Egyptian Sheikh, and he will listen to my recitation and he will correct my reading. That's why I can improve my tilawah, my reading every day.
So from what you said, I found two important points. One is that someone who memorizes the Quran should keep making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help and guidance, because after all it's His word and no one can become familiar with His word without His permission, without His help. So we should keep making dua. That's one thing. Second point I found from your answer is that the environment is very important, because you keep going to the masjid every day, where you find a lot of people reading the Quran and doing ibadat, so that encourages you. So if we want to memorize the Quran, we should always put ourselves in that environment where you can find a lot of worshippers, people who are familiar with the Quran, and also perhaps have a teacher if possible, right? To have a sense of accountability. Every day you have to report duty. Every day you have to be checked. So that's very, very beneficial tips. And I found in a lot of stories that the Muslims in the early generations, they like to ask each other whenever they do some kind of khair or they have some kind of progress, they will ask, what has Allah given you in return? Because we know that Allah is generous, is Kareem. If you do something for Him, He will give you something in return. So I want to ask you, after you memorized the Quran, after this dedication, what has Allah given you in return?
In return, that I feel I feel happiness when I can, for example, when the Imam recites the Quran, I can understand what he's reciting, and I understand the meaning, and that's help us increase our iman, and also I can use this knowledge to maybe to teach to other people who don't know, and that's to earn the reward from Allah.
Right.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah, I think being able to understand what's recited in prayer is a very sweet thing that unfortunately most Muslims don't experience. But you, as a revert who's from an Asian country, who had no background in Arabic in the beginning, but now you have memorized the Quran and you can understand it in prayer. So we should learn from you and really dedicate a lot of efforts in that regard. Let's talk about your life being a revert. So when you go back to Vietnam, I'm pretty sure that you will have many difficulties. What are some of the difficulties as a revert?
So like when I'm at home, like it's difficult for me to find the halal meat. And for example, if I want to eat the halal meat, I had to buy the chicken, then I had to slaughter by myself.
Slaughter it yourself.
Yeah, I had to eat fish all the time.
All right, so you are a talib al-ilm in the real sense, and actually I find this seriousness for knowledge in you that is unfortunately not very common, even among the students of knowledge. So what advice do you have for people who want to seek Islamic knowledge, and also for new Muslims, perhaps? How should we adjust our attitude? How should we be sincere? How can we be sincere? How can we be consistent in our pursuit of knowledge?
We always make dua to Allah and to seek the knowledge. That is, you must think how you will benefit people. I think the most important thing is the ikhlas from Allah. You ask Allah for the ikhlas. And the second thing I need to mention is the patience, because seeking knowledge is not like 1 day or 2 days, or in a few months. It takes years. And on the way of learning, seeking knowledge, you have faced so many difficulties. Allah is testing you.
All right, so now you are seeking knowledge, and I'm pretty sure that you have already obtained a large amount of knowledge in your years of studying. What's your aim with this knowledge? Like after you graduate and perhaps after you learn more, what will you do with this knowledge?
I hope I can use this to make the da'wah to my family first. I hope that they will come to Islam, and I dream that people of my village, they will accept it, open their heart to enter Islam, and inshallah, and I will try to make the da'wah to invite more people to Islam in the future.
Right. What you said reminded me of the ayah in Surah Shu'ara. Not because I memorized very well, but because I memorized this part recently, so it reminded me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet ﷺ, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, and warn your families that are closest to you, right?
Yeah.
The nearest. So the sequence in Allah's command is always from your closest circle and then move on to the further people. We should learn from you that we should start with our families and then those people around us. And then perhaps if we're able, bismillah, move on to further circles. It's also the most difficult, I think you would agree. It's the most difficult to tell your families and people near you. But inshallah, may Allah help you and help all of us to convey Islam to al-aqrabin, ashiratak al-aqrabin, the most near kings. All right, so in the end, you have already memorized the Qur'an, and you also told me that you learned to recite with tajweed properly. How about you recite a part from the Qur'an, any parts that you like, so that we can be motivated to also, improve our recitation and improve our memorization.
Inshallah, why don't we recite together? أفحسبتم أنما خلقناكم عبثا وأنكم إلينا لا ترجعون.
فتعالى الله الملك الحق لا إله إلا هو رب العرش الكريم.
ومن يدع مع الله إلها آخر لا برهان له به فإنما حسابه عند ربه إنه لا يفلح الكافرون.
وقل رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين. Jazakallah khair. Thank you for taking out the time to talk with me. I hope you benefited from what we talked about. And let's all make dua for each other, for this ummah, for every single member of this ummah, so that we can always improve ourselves and become better Muslims, and become, worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us in this word, forgive us in the hereafter, and enter us into Jannah together. Allahumma ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.